everyone. Welcome. I know that we're starting to get some of you fabulous attendees coming in. My name is Catie Ivey. I'm over here at Sales Hacker. I'm so excited for our session today, and you'll hear me repeat this a few times. First and foremost, welcome. But secondly, and almost most importantly, make sure that you check your chat right now. Make sure it's turned to panelists and attendees because we want to talk with you. We want to see what you're saying. Introduce yourself. I am coming from you live in Fort Worth, Texas. Now, Matt, where are you coming from again? You mentioned you got some snow. So where are you at?
Yes, kids are home from school today on a snow day. I'm in northern Westchester, about an hour north of New York City.
Awesome. Hey, Joe, coming in from Ohio. I'm assuming you've got some snow too. Katie, do you have any snow? Where are you coming from?
No snow here. I'm down in Atlanta. It's actually unseasonably cool this last week, but no snow.
Wow. Fort Worth, Texas, not really known for its snow, but we're actually supposed to spend a fabulous Valentine's Day with a high of 20 and like 40% chance of snow. So you can imagine my surprise.
I bet you're going to have a good time with that. You need to enjoy it.
I don't know if Netflix and chill is what I imagined for my Valentine's this year, but it's literally going to be chilling. So we're so excited to have y'all. Don't forget, introduce yourself. I know I see some people in here I'm so excited to have for the session today. Tell us where you're coming from, what role you have. I know we're going to have some people in here who are SDRs. And you know what? We'll actually throw up this poll as you're joining. I'm going to launch this poll for you. Tell us what your role is. Are you an SDR? Are you an AE? Are you a team lead, VP, director, sales enablement? You name it. Are you just here because you're curious about what is on Katie's bar cart like I am?
It's actually not that exciting, to be honest. I tried to remember what you got there.
Decanter.
I do have three really beautiful. I worked at Salesforce years ago, and they gave us these amazing, beautiful decanters for Christmas one year. It was one of my favorite, corporate holiday gifts. So they're really beautiful. I don't use them very often, but they are a good addition to the bar cart.
They are very snazzy. I feel like every time I have a decanter, it gets covered in dust. So it's woefully disappointing because it doesn't get used and it's covered in dust, and they're very challenging to clean. So
yesterday I was watching CNBC in the morning, and Kara Swisher was on, and she always looks a mess, and she's super laid back and really fun. And she had these beautiful bottles of tequila right behind her, lined up. And it was one of the prettiest setups I'd seen in a while. And they went off topic and talked about tequila for 5 minutes. So it was really entertaining.
Well, don't worry, everyone. You will not hear me talk about cheap alcohol. I still am in the phase where I'm okay with it being in a plastic bottle. One day that will change. But today we are going to be talking all things about motivating your teams. I'm really excited. We've got a lot of managers. We've got a lot of directors. I'm going to keep the poll up just a little bit longer. But let me tell you, this is going to be the perfect session as we're starting our sales kickoffs. We're getting excited and energized about what this year is going to hold for our teams. Now is the perfect time as a sales leader to reevaluate how we're actually encouraging our teams, understanding why we're encouraging them, understanding how to actually motivate them with what they need. As much as we love swag, we can only have so many team tumblers or mouse pads for our Mac computers that don't have mouses. So this is going to be an amazing discussion today. I'm going to end the poll. Here we go. Let's share some results. This is going to be perfect. We've got about 20, 40, 60% in the manager, director, VP, about another 10% C-level. We've got some sales enablement folks. Y'all, this is going to be right up your alley. So we're going to kind of jump into this. I promise you won't be hearing from me the whole time. But once again, my name is Catie Ivey from Sales Hacker. I'm so excited. We have an amazing crew today. We have Matt Payne and Catie Ivey. Katie, would you mind just introducing yourself and giving us your little superhero, one super fun fact about you?
superhero and a super fun fact, I would be happy to. My name is Catie Ivey. I run mid-market sales at Demandbase, which is a B2B marketing platform, account-based marketing, account-based selling. I've been at Demandbase about 2 years. Prior to that, I ran a really large commercial team at Marketo for about 3 years and was at Salesforce prior to that. So been in the MarTech space for a long time. Love selling and really, really love managing sales people and sales teams. So I'm excited about the topic. Let's see, one fun fact. I think it's relevant to this conversation. I love being in an office so much that prior to COVID, I was literally commuting from Atlanta to New York every single week to be in the office with my team.
Wow.
And now I have obviously not been in an office with my team for almost a year. So you can tell that some of what we talk about today will be near and dear to my heart.
Wow. Planes, trains, or automobile? Which one was your commute vehicle of choice?
Oh, me and Delta are BFFs. I flew the first week of the year, and it was my first time being on a plane. We actually went on vacation to the Turks and Caicos, and it was my first time being on a plane in like 11 months, and it just felt like heaven.
Wow. All the frequent flyer miles, I'm sure. Matt, what about yourself? Give us a little bit about you.
Yeah, sure. So Matt Payne, I'm Director of North America Sales here at SalesScreen. We're a sales acceleration and performance platform designed to just tap into all of the motivational components of all of your reps and pull as much out of them as possible while figuring out how to get them to have fun and like their jobs better. It's really kind of what our platform's all about. I've been in sales for a long time. Catie and I actually used to work together at Demandbase. It was at Demandbase for a huge part of my career and love the folks there. So really happy to have Catie join us here today. Totally not sales related at all, but I do appreciate scuba diving. It's one of the most fascinating things that I've ever been a part of, and love doing that. Maybe a little bit sales related, but I like trying different things while underwater. And one time I was able to find an octopus and put an octopus on my head underwater. My wife and all of our scuba diving pals had ink squirting all over the place, and it was a good story for the entire boat. So I appreciate that.
And did you get a picture?
Not at that time. It was actually we did not have our like GoPro underwater cameras at the time. It
sure didn't happen. I refuse to believe that this happened.
I know. You can't plan. You can't plan that you're going to have an octopus within reach and be able to put it on your head. I failed there.
Well, I definitely have learned 2 new amazing facts about you both that I will cherish forever. I'm sure our audience will as well. So I'm going to kind of recap a little bit about what we're going to be digging into today, and then we'll just jump into it. For everyone that's here, once again, don't forget that your chat needs to be switched to panelists and attendees so everyone can see. On the bottom bar, you'll also see a Q&A box. You can press that, ask any and every question. We're going to be answering them live as we're going. So take advantage of this opportunity to have these 2 amazing sales leaders here. You can also toss them into the chat. I'll keep an eye on that as well. But today we are really getting into the nitty gritty. Like I said earlier, we're all in the midst of our SKOs or growth summits or you name it. And it's really an amazing time as leaders to be able to kind of level set and reset how we're understanding what our team's motivation is and how we're able to apply different strategies and tactics to not only really understand what our teams need and our sellers need, but also how can we better motivate them to really push them over the line of where they ended this past year. And then what else can we do to not only build out a more strategic team, but how else can we find different ways to motivate, encourage, and because of that, reduce churn, right? That's what we're all big time focusing on, especially January, February. Everyone's looking for new jobs and leaving. So how do we make sure that we're motivating throughout the entire year so that when that time comes, they're going to stay with you? So one of the first things we want to talk about is understanding our sellers' why and what do we need to know? How do we figure out how to help them achieve it? What does that look like? So Matt, I would love to hear from you first. What do you do to understand your reps' reason? And how has that affected your team?
Yeah, sure. I think, I think one of the great things about working with salespeople so much, and I'm fortunate in that not only do I work with salespeople and manage salespeople, I sell into salespeople. And so my whole life is surrounded by chaotic salespeople doing all kinds of crazy things. So for me, it's really kind of fascinating. And when it comes to motivation and success, I think that what I love most about salespeople is that while we all may be wildly emotional and unique in our own ways and have different personalities, when it comes down to it, there are 4 components that we all share as part of our DNA. And in every sales leader that I've talked to and every salesperson that I've come into contact with, I think this is really true with everybody. So I'm really curious to see if you all think the same way here too. But what it comes down to is the 4 components are, 1, we're all competitive. Number 2, we all like to be told we're doing a good job. That validation, like we all need it, we all like it, we thrive on it. 3 is we all like to celebrate. We like to celebrate other people's wins, our own successes. We like to tailgate, like football games, concerts, baby showers, whatever. We like to celebrate anything. And we all like to make money. So we all like to do what we need to do in order to make more money. We're all driven in that capacity and those 4 things. So I think, it'll probably come up quite a bit in the discussion today, but it all seems to all circle back to those 4 components of our DNA, and that's what all salespeople should share.
So let's kind of dig into this a little bit. When we're looking at these 4 components of our DNA, right, as sellers, these are all things that we want to accomplish. Check those boxes. I myself am a huge fan of getting my little gold star, so I totally get it. How do we, as managers, coaches, trainers for our sales teams, how do we approach those conversations, right? Because we can't just sit down and say, hey rep number 1, so what do you want to do this year? Well, I want to hit my number. Okay, great. What do you do with that, right? How do you get into those deeper conversations to really understand which of those categories apply best to those sellers?
I'm happy to tackle that one a little bit. I think it's a super important question. And it's definitely, you're 100% correct. There's not a one size fits all answer, I think, to that question, but figuring out the motivation and the why behind some of those things that our reps and ourselves want to accomplish, I think it's so important. One of the things that I have found it much more challenging to do virtually, but also really, really important is creating those one-on-one, like human level connections. Like one of the reasons I love being in an office, and I typically spend a lot of time with my reps and my team outside of an office over food, over drinks, like spending time, is like, I want to know them as people, like as human beings, to figure out what makes them tick, what they're motivated by, also how they operate. Like we're all really different. I'm really, really fast paced. I talk really fast. I walk really fast. Other people are the opposite of that. It sounds like a really simple, obvious thing, but if I've got a rep on my team that naturally likes to take a deep breath and process information really slowly and respond inside of a sales cycle very differently than is my personality, I need to figure that out, or else I'm going to manage them in a way that's incredibly stressful for that person. So there's a million different examples that I can give like that, but figuring out who they are as people is like foundational 101 stuff before we can really get to them feeling comfortable enough, I think, to even open up. Like some of the, like, I want to hit my number is, I've got a ton of student debt that I want to pay off, or, hey, I really want to propose to my girlfriend and I don't feel like I can afford the ring that I want to buy, or maybe I've got mega family drama that I'm responsible for and I want to figure out how to like carry some of that and like pull my weight in a whole new way. Like you're not going to get those things out of someone that doesn't know you or feel seen or feel like they can trust you and open up. So I think it starts with some of that, finding ways to make those human level connections, which again, way harder to do virtually, I think, than over some beers or in person. But it's really important. And we have to, as leaders, find ways to recreate that if we want to get to any of those same outputs, in my opinion.
I'm curious if we can dig a little bit into this. Whenever I think of building these relationships, I think of this constant gray line as a manager. How do we get to that human relationship without crossing that line to becoming like best friends with our reps, right? Because that's something as managers we need to be cognizant of making sure that, we're not honestly having preferential treatment because of these relationships. We have a stronger bond. We're more understanding. We're more forgiving. how do you kind of navigate that as you're trying to build these relationships?
Matt, do you want to tackle that first? I have an opinion, but I'd love to hear yours.
Yeah, I'll start. I loved the delayed eye communication that we had right there too. That was solid through the Zoom. I think the word human is a really big part of that. I think that a lot of times with Zoom as the barrier, it makes it more difficult to have relaxed conversations with the people that you manage and your peers. And I think that the more we recognize that we're real people on the other side of the computer screen, the easier our lives become. And that's, really not even only just with our interpersonal communication within our team, but also with the people that we're selling to, but that to me is so important in how you manage and how you motivate and how you interact with not only the people that work on your team, but also your peers across the organizations, is being flexible and emotional and a person to the other side.
And I saw a question come through in the chat. Before I tackle that, I agree with everything that you just said, Matt. The only other thing I would add in or layer into your question, Catie, is I will always hope to err on the side of caring too much or connecting too much. We can always create boundaries and barriers later. And I think obviously you have to build massive amounts of respect for one another. And your reps have to know that you're going to give them real feedback and you're going to be straight with them. And when they drop the ball or don't perform well or don't hold up their end of the bargain, that you have the guts to have that conversation and be really direct. But we've probably all worked for bosses that maybe we feel like didn't care quite so much or maybe didn't see us as human beings. And I would always prefer to err on the side of maybe caring a little bit too much or building too much of a connection with people that work for me. I'm a firm believer that our ultimate job as sales leaders is to make our people the best versions of themselves, whatever that looks like. There's lots of different shapes that can take. But if we make our people better all the time and we're focused on that, the numbers follow, the revenue, the forecast, all the different pieces that matter. And sometimes there's a lot of pieces. So it's easy to get lost, I think, in the fact that our job is to make our people better.
And Catie, I'm curious your opinion here too. I had a manager at one point that shared her why with me, and I had a series of managers that I was kind of disconnected with, and it was just like they asked me a lot of questions, and I never really knew much about my managers. And then it changed, and when I had a manager that shared her life and what she was working toward, and that really changed my whole perspective on how to manage others, but I also just suddenly felt more comfortable interacting and kind of trusting that manager. Have you gone through something like that?
Yeah, for sure. Most recently I joined Demandbase 2 years ago and was taking on a whole new team. I had never met a single one of them in person prior to joining, other than one phone call interview about the process. I just didn't know any of them well. And definitely I started with hey, I'd love to let you in a bit in terms of who I am, my background, my strengths and my weaknesses. I think being self-aware is really important as a manager or as a leader. There's things I'm not great at. I'm not super detail oriented. I tend to forget things at times. I'm really good at starting projects, not always good at finishing projects. The fact that I'm willing to communicate some of those things, I also am pretty self-aware of the things that I'm good at, and I'm confident enough to bring that to the table. But being able to share those things and tying in, hey, here's why I'm really excited about this role or this job. Here's how it fits into some of my bigger picture career objectives that I'm working towards. Hey, let me tell you a little bit about my husband and my dog and where we live. Again, maybe to Catie's earlier question, those can err on the side of maybe too personal or too much. But I just feel like I'm not going to get that in return unless I'm willing to at least kind of lead from that angle.
Yeah, I really love that. I know we've got a few questions. Catie, what does it look like for you in this remote world? How has your approach changed with keeping those connections?
Yeah, it's a good question. And to be honest, it's not one I feel like I've fully mastered. Do we ever fully master it? I don't really know. I am going to probably always err on the side of I would like to get on a plane right now and go fly and hang out with my team and just be face to face with more of them. That Matt already alluded to the fact that Zoom does create some opportunity just to really relax, have open conversations. We do a lot of video on with my team. I recognize that that can get very tiring, and some people are quite stressed about being on camera all the time. So it's good to at least ask the question, hey, do we need some like camera off time? I try to do some of my one-on-ones walking or outside. I'm in Atlanta, so it's not quite as cold as you guys in the Northeast with all of your snow. So it works a little bit better. Sometimes that's hard though, if we're reviewing pipeline or deals or dashboards, stuff like that. Sometimes I just need to be in front of a computer. So if it's been a lot of in front of computer feeling really formal, I try to purposely carve out, hey, sometime that we're either going to be on the phone, walking, or outside, or just making sure that I'm making space for conversation that isn't just about deals and work and focus and, you know, the things that we're doing from a day-to-day perspective. But to answer the question in terms of whether my approach has changed, I don't really think so. I think it's still trying to know my reps on an individual level, figure out how they operate and what makes them tick, and then make sure that I'm keeping the door open at all times for, hey, what do you need from me that you're not getting? Are there some things that you feel like I'm missing the mark? Like, give me some feedback on how this is working so that I can make sure I'm supporting you. Because most of them are new to remote work as well. So they're trying to figure out what works well for them. So like, we're kind of all in it together, I think. And it just comes down to being transparent about that.
That's really insightful. And Matt, since Catie kind of shared a few approaches or thought processes on building these relationships, what else would you add, especially after the craziness of last year? I don't even know, because the pandemic's still happening, so it can't be post-pandemic. But what else would you add on different approaches or actions that you've done with your teams to help keep them motivated in the past year and a half?
Yeah, I think part of it is on the manager for sure to build better relationships and stronger relationships and fill them with trust and communication for sure, right? Like that is that's a manager's job in the first place, but even more so important as you've been trying to retain talent during a pandemic, hire talent during a pandemic, and onboard talent during a pandemic. Like those are all absurdly difficult things to do. One in the first place, let alone during a pandemic, right? So that's that's all really important. The other part of it though is what is the organization doing, right? It's not all on the manager to make it happen. I think that an organization has to get behind an investment in their people, and not necessarily monetarily, but just as a cultural thing. What are you doing to help motivate your people, and what types of activities are you doing as a company? What types of activities are you doing on a team basis? What types of activities are you doing on an individual basis that tap into what drives your people? Particularly for this conversation, your sales teams. And so there's a lot of things that people are doing, and from a competition perspective and from a communication perspective that I think are really important. A lot of companies, and maybe Catie can talk about this in a little bit, but a lot of companies are doing focused competitions across their organizations. So choosing a time period, creating a competition that gets everybody across the organization involved in some capacity. That allows them to explore an improvement in activity, some excitement across the board. I think people need to find a way to infuse some excitement into the mix. So I think that's a good starting point to help keep people motivated, especially when you think about one of the core components of salespeople is that we're all competitive.
I love that. And Matt, it's interesting. It ties into a question that came from Melissa in the chat, talking about how having fun seems to have become more and more important. It's being talked about a lot. And I think it's not surprising. Like for many obviously the last year has just been insanely stressful and challenging in so many ways, professionally and personally. But I also think that it's created a little bit of space for some of us that maybe don't always take the time to think and process at that depth of a level in terms of like what I enjoy doing and how to make work fun. Like we've all been forced to think about that a little bit more. It was interesting. We just had our whole company revenue kickoff last week, but 2 weeks before that, I did just a kickoff with just my team and some little just bite-sized meetings. And one of the things we worked on together was building out a V2 mom, if you know the Salesforce model, or just literally your vision statement, your mission, what are you going to do as a team? And one thing that came up a ton was people wanted to have fun. Like they want to enjoy this year. When they look back on this part of their career, they want to feel like this was a fun team to be on. It was like my day-to-day, of course, I worked my butt off. Like I worked really hard and there was challenges, but I really, really enjoyed what I was doing. So we had a lot of dialogue about what does that look like for us? Many of the people on my team don't enjoy being behind a screen and being in their home office. So like, are there things that we can do? And I don't think it's like, oh, we'll do these 5 things and it's going to be fun. You've got to have those conversations with your people to figure out what aspects of the job are naturally maybe more fun versus less, and how do we amplify those things. But I agree. I think it's so important at the team level. It's important at the rep level as well. But then all the way up to your point, Matt, organizationally, we have to be thinking about how do we drive engagement and create the space for people to enjoy what they're doing.
I really love what you said there on creating the space. I feel like that's been kind of a buzz theme the past couple of months of, are we creating a space for our teams to do this? Are we allowing and encouraging? And as we look at different activities that we can be doing, Joe asked a good question. What are some of the contested or contests that you're conducting? What do spiffs look like now? What are things to give away? I know I've seen teams. I actually thought this was really cool, but I'm also a little nerdy, so forgive me on this. I actually saw a team that did a virtual escape room where they had a camera in the escape room, and the employees of the escape room were doing what the remote employees were telling them to do. So you could be like, oh, check under that globe. And the employee would go and check under the globe to see if there was something there. So I was like, oh, that's a little quirky. But it's a quirky team, so I would expect nothing less. So what are you guys seeing? What are you doing for your own teams? What do you wish you could do? What does that look like? Matt, do you want to go first? Catie?
Oh, so sorry. I jumped in. I'll tell you one that we have running right now. And it's not so much on the spiff side of the house. It's more just something that we're doing across the company that I think is really fun. We've been doing it for quite some time. So it's not new to like post or since the pandemic. But we do what we call a Shark Week. It's usually the first or second week of every quarter. The beginning of the year is a little different because you have kickoffs and other things. But we literally mobilize the entire company around generating pipeline. And we do shark like memes everywhere, and people wear random hats and clothes. I ran a team meeting in this hoodie yesterday that looks like a shark for anyone that sees the video. Like we are like, to your point, Catie, really nerdy, like super, like we just go above and beyond and make it really fun. And we do the prizes this year. I mean, like they're not anything super significant. We've got some different $250 spiffs for individuals and teams that do certain things. But it's literally all just focused on booking new meetings. We identify some key things that are important for our customer base as well. But it's just an effort to focus the whole company on something that we know really matters, and then create fun and jargon and like conversation around it, emails, Slack channels, things like that. So I would encourage sometimes, especially for smaller companies, or if you're a leader that maybe doesn't have access to a ton of budget, sometimes it feels challenging because I don't have a ton of dollars to throw at something. But sometimes even something as silly as calling it a Shark Week and making people wear costumes, like you would be amazed at some of the levels of engagement and fun that actually can happen around things like that.
Yeah, Shark Week, I mean, as a former Demandbase employee, like Shark Week is certainly has been a big part of my life. So I appreciate the costumes. I appreciate the excitement about it. And you know, there's a lot of value that's built into the Shark Week concept, and we run a lot of competitions where I am, and I talk to a lot of sales leaders and guide a lot of sales leaders through competitions that they're running. And I think that there are a few things to keep in mind. One of them is that since every sales rep is competitive, it's worth running competitions. Like people want to be in competitions. They want to compete against their peers. And, the benefit there is that sometimes that can just be easy. You can launch a competition and everybody will get into it, and everybody will do more work, and everybody will build more pipeline, and, those kinds of things. It doesn't always work out that way. So, a couple things that I've experienced too is, there are different types of competitions to run for different objectives. I think the fun comment, I think, is an important one to come up early in our conversation today. It's important to think that salespeople often just need to close deals, right? Like and people celebrate a closed deal, but there's so much that goes into a deal cycle and everything that happens before a deal is even conceived, that there are tons of things to celebrate along the way. And that's, where I think a lot of companies are starting to shift their competitions in that direction, rather than just closed won deals and standard leaderboards on that. A lot of what Demandbase is doing, which I really like, is about pipeline generation. So they're doing things on meetings booked, not necessarily demo completed, for example, but booking the meeting in the first place, the early indicators of future success, things that pinpoint like call volume. Making a phone call, getting somebody on the phone is far more effective than sending a billion emails, right? And so having a component of your contest be on call volume. Or what a lot of companies are doing is running multiple simultaneous competitions that may tap into different people's strengths. So everybody's got top performers. You're going to have somebody that's on the phone more than everybody else. You're going to have somebody that books more meetings than everybody else. Or maybe you have a handful, right? Those are your top performers, but that's not necessarily everybody. And when you have a competition that the same people win over and over and over again, it ends up demotivating others. And so when you run different styles of competition simultaneously, it gives multiple people a way to excel. And you can also change the way a competition is won. So one approach to consider is that something like a lottery-based competition is becoming more and more popular to motivate the middle performers. So, if it's meetings booked, for example, that your competition is on, every time you book a new meeting, you get a ticket, right? And the more meetings you book, the more tickets you get, and the bigger your chance is of actually winning that prize. From a management perspective, the great thing there is you can buy one prize instead of buying 30 prizes or 20 prizes, whatever your team size is. You can buy one prize. Maybe it's a pretty cool prize. And everybody's working toward it, right? But then from an actual rep perspective, the person that books one meeting that may not be the top performer yet, but is trying to get there, like they still have a chance of winning. So giving people a chance and letting people play to their strengths is a great way to infuse competitions into the mix to keep people motivated.
Matt, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
First off, love this idea of not just always motivating and always, giving our top performers everything, because it can be incredibly demotivating and honestly very disappointing and frustrating for those that just can't figure out why they can't get more deals or why they can't get more meetings and what that looks like. So whenever we're looking at kind of this middle ground or even the lower tiered performers, what do you do to help kind of balance this motivation but also coaching? So what could that kind of relationship look like, and what type of, I guess, a coaching motivating sequence would you look at?
Yeah, coaching often comes down to personal accountability and recognizing what people are doing and what they're not doing, and helping the rep recognize that, and then being a resource to talk through where they need to improve or maybe what they're not recognizing. So for us on our end, we are very metric focused. I think the beauty of being in sales is that so much is recorded. Mm-hmm. And so if you can simplify the metrics part of it and understand your waterfall metrics, understand what your reps need to do in order to be successful, at least from a numbers perspective, and hold your reps accountable. Like, make it simple for them to visualize what they're doing and where they are and what they need to do. And then also let them compare that to their peers, I think is a really big thing that goes on. So, being visible and transparent with your activity-based metrics is a great way for people to become aware of what they're doing or what they need to do in order to become more successful. And then when you simplify that part of it, and you take that out of the work that a manager has to do, then you get to shift gears as a manager and start to focus on the human elements of coaching, like the real value that you are as a manager. Like, you're not hired to like compile spreadsheets of people's activity data. You're hired to motivate and coach and encourage reps to do better. And so it is important to make sure that they can compare themselves against their peers. And if they see somebody that's crushing it, like, what is that person doing from a metrics perspective differently than you are? But then the manager can start to focus in on what's happening between the meeting booked and the discovery call, or what's happening between the discovery call and like the demo. Is there a breakdown there? What's your talk track? Let's pull in some gong data or chorus data and understand, like what's going on there. But understanding the metrics, making it visible for all of your reps so that they can hold themselves accountable. And then you can have quality conversations about what those metrics really mean and how to make them better.
I love that, Matt. One other small thing I would add on top of it, and it could kind of fit into the spiff bucket, but it's also really tied into just fostering collaboration and teamwork. And I mean, one of the things I think we all miss is just some of the things you naturally learn from one another. You might be in a team meeting, or you might just be overhearing a demo that someone else is running 2 desks over, but there's a lot of just sort of natural picking things up that happens in the office. And so as leaders, I know we're all trying to figure out, how do we recreate that? How do we get more purposeful with that type of knowledge share? And I think there are ways, and they can be super informal at times, but little types of competitions or things that you do within your team that can foster that, while also, Catie, to your point, giving an opportunity for folks that may not always be at the top of the leaderboard or always be the natural standouts to really showcase things that they're good at. Like sometimes I'll have folks record a really short video, pitching a specific product, or, 30 seconds on topic X, or sharing something interesting that they, saw on LinkedIn the day before. But little things where it's either video or written or something that just gets thrown onto our team Slack channel, and then we'll vote and pick the best one. Or little things like, and it might literally be a $20 Uber gift card that I send someone. Like, it's not always anything that epic. But one, it gets us just interacting, learning from one another, and does give an opportunity for someone like, wow, like super impressed with your take on that. That was incredible. As a leader, it gives me an opportunity to really give someone kudos and talk about how excellent XYZ was, without just having the traditional leaderboards, metrics, all the same things that I focus on a lot at times. So I think that's just one other small idea.
Yeah, and you just alluded to something too in how people respond to different types of rewards. I think that's an important topic too. I've seen a lot of companies these days start to move into a direction of keeping track of points or rewards over time for good things that they're doing. So your idea of like giving somebody kudos for certain things well done, or if their performance improves after a coaching session, to recognize them with a gift card or things like that. And I think that what's important there is that as salespeople, we do care about money. We're in it to make money. We don't handle all these emotional outbursts to not make money, right? So that's important. But beyond a paycheck and beyond just the deals that close, there's a lot of cool stuff that happens that goes into making us all stronger and better. Coaching and being receptive to coaching. But even winning competitions is, there are a lot of companies right now that are moving away from a traditional spiff, like a monetary spiff, and going more towards something that's like a catalog-based concept or a reward shop, where you could win points for a competition and then exchange them for gifts that you care about. And the reason people are doing that is that not everybody cares about the same thing. $250 is $250, and most people do care about that. But maybe you want to accumulate points over time, and maybe that's doing well from a coaching session like you were just talking about, and then getting an endorsement from your manager. Maybe it's winning a competition. Maybe it's winning the lottery-based competition. Maybe some other reps that are your top performers, and you give them a traditional leaderboard competition where like the top 3 people get a tiered winning total, or things like that. And then you poll your audience and say, what kind of prizes would you guys want to win? That may not be a traditional salesperson's purchase. Like they get a commission check, they can buy their PS5 or something like that if they want to. But in a reward shop, you could put things that are not monetary, like a lunch or a dinner with your boss or with the chief revenue officer, or something that's like a personal experience, not necessarily just a monetary experience. Or a common one that I see a lot is giving push-ups to a manager, in a weekly town hall, and people can trade in their rewards for that, or other things like a Yeti backpack, and a Sonos speaker, and all the kind of traditional things that people like. So diversifying the rewards that come into your competitions, and really even into the accolades or kudos that you give out, is becoming a really popular trend that we're seeing too.
What's really interesting about this is, in sales, we always say, oh, the seller or the buyers are changing, right? Or how people are buying it is different, and they're more informed, and they're seeing all these different things. And so when they come to you, more often than not, they already know what products they want or where you fit in their top 3, right? And what's really interesting about what you both have been saying, and one of the most common themes I'm hearing, is our sellers are changing too, and what's important to them is changing. So gone are these days of the old school management style where it's very almost Wolf of Wall Street. I always reference that. I never reference car dealerships, but I just always imagine like old school sales being Wolf of Wall Street, really aggressive. We're there for 15 hours. We're making 300 calls a day, but still not always really accomplishing what could be done if reps were coached and motivated a little bit differently. I know we've got a lot of less tenured managers on this call, and so I would love to hear from y'all of what are some strategies that they could apply today for their teams. How do they, just think about, I know you both are very well-seasoned managers and directors, and you've gone up these corporate ranks, so I know it's a little hard to kind of put yourself back in their shoes, but think about your first team that you manage and how exciting and nerve-wracking. There's all this advice, and there's all these things, and you want to be so different than every manager you've ever had because you can do a better job, right? What advice would you give to these newer managers who are here because they know they need to make a change? They know that they have to figure out how to motivate their teams differently, and they know they need to understand their reps why, but how do they do that? What are some practical pieces of advice? Matt, I know you've got something.
Yeah.
You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first, and certainly want to hear Catie's opinion on this too. But I think one of the things that I've recognized, and I think a lot of us recognize, is that the biggest differentiator we all have against our competitors is our people. And if we focus on that, and we arm our people to be successful and to believe in themselves and to understand how to perform against our competitors, we're going to win. And the more we can focus on our people, the more we can help develop our people, arm our people, and motivate our people, the more successful we'll be, because we're hiring people we believe in the first place, and we just need to help them get there. And that's what's really important for us from a manager perspective, in moving our people forward.
Yeah, I agree with that 1,000%. And I can certainly relate to many of you that are new in the role, first-time managers. It's funny, like, doesn't matter how long you lead teams or how many teams you lead. I think there's always this sense of like, whoa, do I really know what I'm talking about? So the insecurity doesn't ever fully go away, just FYI. I would say, to Matt's point, finding ways to infuse confidence in your people early is usually a fun way to get quick wins. So we're all really insecure. All of us have gaps. All of us have challenges. If you can find ways to help reps identify their strengths before you start focusing on weaknesses, that's probably the first piece of advice that I would give to any new manager. And then I think that also ties into your own element of self-awareness, taking the time to figure out, okay, regardless of whether, you might literally be 6 months into your career thinking like, I can't believe they're asking me to give this person input. You might be, 20 years into your career with a ton of tenure. At the end of the day, all of us have things that we're really, really good at and really natural at. And there's things that you bring to the table that are unique and your team can absolutely learn from you. So take the time to identify a couple of those things in yourself, your own strengths, things that you feel, regardless of all the layers of insecurity, what are a few things that you feel really confident and proud of as a leader? I guarantee if you can figure out what those are, you're going to find some pretty natural ways to then be able to translate that to your team. And it will make it much easier then to identify strengths and infuse that confidence in the people that you manage.
Wow. That was a lot to process. In
I was
all
about to
the best
say,
ways possible.
I can keep talking about that topic for a long time because it's what I'm really passionate about. But I'll stop because I'm aware of the clock.
I absolutely love it. And one of the things that there's so many, this call, wow. I don't even really know how to start recapping or summarizing because there's so many great nuggets, so many great pieces of advice. I already know that so many of you are going to go home and take this idea of a lottery style spiff into your programs and say, oh, boss, I can afford this now. We can do all the spiffs. And one thing I would like us to spend, I know we've only got about 15 minutes or so. One thing I'd really like for us to spend a little bit of time on is, we've talked about really understanding our sellers' why. We've talked about how as leaders and managers, we can come alongside them. We can support them. We can be vulnerable as well to help build that human relationship. We've talked about different strategies, right, to help our reps, whether that be lottery style, different ways of motivating and coaching and how we can combine that in a nice little process that makes sense. We've talked about specific strategies around taking our reps to that next step for them. But as we kind of finish up today, I would love for us to hit on our third topic, which is tactical, practical strategies for building an unstoppable team. So not just focusing on how to build that human relationship and really getting to the core of their why, but as we're going through hiring and firing, what do these processes look like? How do we keep that human relationship? How do we start that motivation from the hiring stage? So as we bring on reps, they're so excited. They got a new job. This is great. How do we set the precedent that the culture at this company is about really motivating and creating this environment where we have that type of a relationship? What does that look like?
I will take a stab at it first. That's a big question. There's a lot I think that we could unpack there. One of the things that I think is really interesting that happens when you do actually get to know your people as humans and on some of the levels that we've been talking about is you start to figure out that there's people that are really good at things that you aren't maybe naturally as good at. And you start to see this concept of a team. And again, whether it's 3 people or 33 people, like a team has the potential to be so much more than just the sum of its parts. And I really feel like our job as leaders is to figure out what the sum of those parts can look like. And then sometimes just to get out of the way and give people, again, that concept of giving them the space to do things that they're really strong at. One of the mistakes that I feel like I made when I look back at last year is I wasn't purposeful enough at creating some different social activity. We all got really tired of the Zoom happy hours and, trivias. So it wasn't my natural strong suit to like plan in advance and organize some of those things. And there's people on my team that it absolutely is their strong suit, right in their wheelhouse. And I need to just get out of the way and delegate a little bit more and realize there's some people that are going to be great at finding creative, interesting, different things for us to do that then the team is going to thrive off of. And so being able to be willing to step back enough to give people the opportunity to really be amplified in terms of who they are. To me, when I hear that concept of unstoppable teams, like unstoppable people happen when we just are great coaches and we help pull out the greatness in them. But unstoppable teams is a whole different like ball game. Like if you can get to that level where people are actually better because they're working together and they're learning from one another and they're multiplying one another's strengths and making up for one another's weaknesses. I mean, that's like the secret sauce that I think we're all dying to get to. So I think lots of advice I could give there. One is get out of the way once you figure out that there's people that are good at things that you're not.
I often recognize that so much of my career has been me just trying to figure out how to get out of the way. It's always kind of interesting. One of the things that you just said that I really like too is the focus on the team concept and the team word. I also like the fact that a lot of the discussions today, we've been using the word human, which is, I feel like it's just worked itself into so much of my discussions, maybe more so during the pandemic than ever before. But I just love recognizing that, because it's just, we are all real people working with and selling to other real people, whether there's a technology barrier in front of us or not, we're still real people. And that's important. But this concept of team, I think, is really interesting for us to think about when we're talking about trying to make high performing teams, trying to keep them high performing or make them even more high performing. And I think that a few things to think about are one, celebrate. You got to find ways to celebrate, and not every person likes the same celebration. So switch it up. And keep trying, keep moving it, but keep celebrating, and celebrate as much as you can. We all like to celebrate. We all get excited about stuff. And so more than just the big wins, celebrate the little things across your team. I think that is extremely helpful. Also, what we're doing a lot of is switching up teams to keep things fresh. And so, because people like teams, salespeople are often team oriented. They've been a part of some team in their life, and so they like teams. But especially as we're all commonly seeing the same computer face to the same computer face over and over and over again on our team, switching it up periodically is a great way to infuse a little bit of a boost into the mix. So creating custom teams or teams within teams, and rotating things around so people get a new fresh face to talk to compete with, to celebrate with, to high five through their computer. That's a really important thing to keep in mind is keep it fresh, rotate it around, mix it up, because it's like a whole new job experience for somebody when their team changes. And it doesn't necessarily have to be into an entirely different department. It can even be within your own team. It's just creating unique pods and switching that up, I think, is a really great tactic that a lot of people are doing.
I love that. And one more, if you don't mind me to throw in, Catie, and it actually ties into a question that Darcy asked about building trust and how do we handle some of the challenges that our reps are going through on a personal level and things that are outside of work. I do think that it's really important for us to gauge the health of the collective team as well. We've talked a lot about the people, but we started recognizing last year, in the fall, our teams were really tired. At least the sellers, they were working more hours. Most of them had transitioned from these long commutes. So now they had all this extra time. They weren't really creating barriers. A lot of the folks that work for me don't have kids. So they were just working a ton more. And so we recognized we needed to do some things really deliberately to actually force them to have some element of balance. So we did every other Friday off for a little season. We changed some things up with the schedule. We blocked some times to say we're not allowed to do internal meetings these days, these times. Again, there's no one size fits all for that, but being willing to take a hard look at that collective environment and figure out, are people mentally healthy? Are they refreshed? Are they getting enough sleep? Have those types of conversations. Because a lot of, if you've got folks that work on your team that are young or live in a city, they are living in really small spaces and working in really small spaces that were probably not designed to do everything in the same place. So you've got to figure out how to tune into that and make sure that you're helping enable them to get some space outside of that.
Yeah. And the one question that just came in from Kevin, I believe, was about the idea of teams with a workforce that could be of different ages that may not be receptive to games or competitions or any of those kinds of things, which I think is really interesting, because it's true in some capacity, but also it's interesting. Somebody that says they're not into competitions may also be a Peloton user that actively is riding and trying to unlock those achievements, or plays a game on their cell phone and is trying to beat somebody else's score, or even if it's word with friends, or like you can't escape competitions anymore. Like everybody on the face of the earth is trying to unlock some badge somewhere. Like that's our world. That's our strange life we live in now, attached to our mobile phones, right? So it is kind of cool. I think it's just a matter of the perspective that you put in front of them, and the approach that you take with it. And so a standard leaderboard style competition of like whoever can close the most deals may not work for everybody inside your organization. You've got to think through the types of people that you have inside of your company and then switch it up. And so a few simple ways to do that are change the style of a competition, like maybe do a leaderboard so that your top performers can still get that, because your top performers are the ones that like the leaderboards the best. Right, so do that, right? Like that's okay. You can run that kind of competition. Run a lottery-based competition for something that may be more for middle performers. Another variation that a lot of people are doing are taking like our traditional white elephant gift exchange that a lot of people did in the office, where like everybody brings a gift, you don't know what it is, you draw a number, and then you get to pick out what the gift is, or steal somebody else's. A lot of people are turning that into a competition where every time you create a new opportunity, you get to either open a new gift or steal somebody else's, which is you could have a prize that's a PS5 or like a pack of gum, and you don't know what it's going to be, right? So creating variation into the mix. And then the other part that's really helpful, especially for diverse workforces that have a wide age range, the idea of creating custom teams and switching it up regularly. What I've seen is that it actually does a really great job in connecting some younger people on your team with some more experienced people on your team, and allows them to both share and interact in a way that they may not have done that, even if we were still in a physical workplace. So changing things up, giving everybody exposure, and recognizing that it's not one size fits all, and use some variation or introduce variation into the mix will be really helpful.
Wow, I absolutely love this. I love this idea of figuring out, I mean, that's really been this whole thing today, right? Is really figuring out what motivates our teams. And then just like whenever we teach, right? If you look at sales enablement, it shouldn't all just be presentations. Not everyone learns best with presentations, right? It should be different variations. It should be tossing balls around to figure out, quick ways to do objection handling, or whatever it may look like. The same principle applies with motivating our teams. It's not one size fits all, right? I know we've only got about 3 minutes, so I would love to finish this conversation today with maybe 1 or 2 key takeaways. If you have to summarize our discussion today, what's 1 or 2 themes, topics, ideas, questions that you would leave with the attendees today? Matt, I'll let you go first.
I think that there are a few things for us to recognize. One, we're all in the same boat. It's not like some companies are working entirely in an office and we're just like the weird ones that are not allowed to go in and talk to other people in person, right? Like we're all in the same boat. Even the people that we're selling into are all in the same boat. And so it's important to recognize that we're all dealing with the same kind of stuff and have a lot of the similar struggles. And so, and accept that. And then the other part of it is, or the next part is be open to trying some new things and test out what works with your team, because not everybody on your team is going to care about the same kind of stuff. And if you rotate through some new things, you'll introduce and infuse some new excitement to the group. And salespeople are simple, excitable humans. You just need to figure out what'll turn it on. And the more you experiment and the more you try some things out, the more you bring celebration into your world, the more you start having some fun, the better off your team's going to do. And they'll appreciate you for it, and they'll all be more successful.
Oh, I love that. Simple, excitable human beings. Yeah, we're totally up on time, and I'm trying to figure out how to be very short, which is not usually my strength. I would say big takeaway is greatness at anything doesn't just happen, and great leadership never just happens. And I think if there's one thing that I've learned in managing fully remote versus in an office is that a lot of the things that I was able to just sort of accidentally do as a leader or a manager. Now I have to do on purpose. And if you want to lead your teams to greatness and create those types of unstoppable teams and those fully like wired in human beings that are crushing it and setting themselves up for greatness, you're going to have to do it on purpose and probably take some more time to think about what that looks like at the individual level as well as at the team level.
Wow. Yep, we are up on time. These were amazing takeaways. Thank you, Matt and Catie. This was an amazing session. I know all of us learned so much. Thank you again to SalesScreen for sponsoring this. If you have any questions about them, reach out to Matt. Don't forget the session will be available within 24 hours, so check your email for that. You can also check out the replay at saleshacker.com under training and events or on the YouTube. But this was just so incredibly insightful and really encouraging about the intentionality that's needed for this. So with that, I hope everyone has an absolutely fabulous rest of the week. Go figure out what you need to do to make sure that you are building a successful team, an unstoppable team working better together. So thank you again, Catie and Matt, so much. We really appreciate you.